Well, I'm happy to have with me today Mark Hubbard, who's president of Paragon Furniture, located in Arlington, Texas. I know your company is very forward-thinking about furniture for education. So over the last, I guess, since 1984, since you've been in education, can you kind of briefly share with us what you think you've learned in, maybe 36 years of being in education?
Sure. The biggest lesson that we've learned is just how impactful schools are to communities, to the health of a community. When I entered into the business and the industry in 2004, my business partner and I came into it really not understanding the impact that schools have, and understanding that over the last now 16 years, we just celebrated our 16th year as owners. It's become really evident now that our mission goes way beyond just making furniture. It's about impacting directly the lives of our students and our teachers by the solutions that we provide. And that makes the work meaningful for us.
Well, outstanding. The Future Ready School has evolved in also many ways. And one of the areas that's always difficult to change, because it's kind of been rooted in tradition for so long, is libraries. And today it's not about just books. So the rise of the maker movement, whether it's STEAM or STEM, collaboration, technology, flexibility, can you share with us your knowledge on libraries? I understand you have a lot of expertise in that area.
Yeah, so libraries have really changed. You're right. And even just in the last 10 years, I think we've seen an acceleration of that change. When I came through the system, the public school system, libraries were quiet spaces primarily. They were places where you went for independent study, research. It wasn't a space where there was a lot of collaboration or teamwork. And boy, that's really changed a lot in the last 10 years. And I think that rate of change is only accelerating with maker spaces. As you probably know, maker spaces are a new area of study and experimentation, and they have been sort of bolted onto, in a lot of cases, to library spaces. So inevitably, that makes library spaces operate differently. They're more active. The noise levels are higher. There's more volume in these spaces than there used to be. And that to us is one of the more exciting and interesting changes that's happened in libraries, is the makerspace introduction into a lot of library spaces.
So I know furniture is really key to making spaces flexible and adaptable. When it relates to libraries, what are some of the products that you offer that you've kind of designed with your experience, and how successful have those been?
Sure. Well, we've focused on mobility as being a key feature of these spaces, because these educational real estate spaces now aren't quite as static as they used to be. We've really tried to focus our series on being agile. That's been a key feature, agility. But with agility, you also need durability. As things move around more, they're more susceptible to, over time, to disrepair. And so we've really focused on upticking or increasing the quality of our product as we've increased the mobility of it. Tables, chairs, soft seating elements, those are really where our product focus is. That's where our product focus is within libraries and makerspaces.
Let's kind of move to the conference that's coming up. This is going to be an outstanding conference this year with it being virtual. Yeah. And what do you expect attendees to either contribute and or take away from this year's conference? What do you think that might be?
I think the attendees have an opportunity to actually get more information and have a deeper dive into what we're doing as suppliers to the industry. During a trade show, there's a lot of stuff going on. When you're physically there's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of people coming in and out of the booths, and I think it's harder to hold concentration levels. I actually think that this year's virtual show will allow us to engage with our attendees in a more meaningful way, maybe deeper way, to talk about what we do, how it applies, and how it has meaning to students and teachers. So I actually think this year's show could be interesting from that perspective.
Well, I know you're one of the leaders in the industry when it comes to furniture and education. So EDspaces is really a premier conference that brings all that convergence together for creating outstanding educational spaces. So the new, I guess the existing members who've been part of EDspaces for years really understand its value.
You
What
bet.
would you say as a member of, I guess, the executive committee, what would you say to new attendees in terms of the value of EDspaces? Because you really have to go a couple years because there's so much to learn and so many contacts to make. But what would you share with some of the new attendees?
Well, I think that the people that are involved in EDmarket and EDspaces show are the
Right.
experts in the industry. We are the ones, the practitioners out there every day, talking to teachers, talking to administrators, talking to design experts, architectural community. We're out there talking to the people that are really practitioners. They're doing the work every day, and so I think attendees, when they come to our show, they are surrounded by the folks who know what's really happening on the ground.
Right.
Um, and I think that's probably based on just experience out there doing every day, but it's also there's a lot of effort made by our members to understand that read the research, to go into the white papers and really talk about and understand better the way that we're impacting cognition, the healthful benefits of what we do, and again, how schools really can impact the community at large. I think all those things are part of what EDmarket offers and what EDspaces can deliver.
Hmm. I know you said at the very beginning of our talk how important it was for you to spend a couple years trying to get integrated into the education market and get a sense of what their needs are, because they're really looking to you for some leadership. But you have to listen to them and somehow through that kind of iterative process, develop the kind of products that really addresses their needs.
You
So,
bet. You bet. Yeah, and I
yeah.
think some of our best ideas honestly have come from teachers. That's the
Hmm.
truth. When we go out and we are humble and our ears are open and we're willing to be taught, we learn to take those ideas. We take those ideas back to our research and development process, and what comes out of that, the fruit that comes out of that, is usually the best.
Hmm. Well, there's so many places to get your knowledge. Teachers is one. This conference is another. Um, I saw a book titled "Humanizing the Education Machine." What is that book about? Is that something that you read or something that you edited? I'm not sure. I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, we were very fortunate to be involved in that project. We were asked to be part of a cohort of stakeholders in the industry, from architects to construction people to our distribution dealer partners to suppliers. We teamed with educators and administrators to try to understand what was missing, what could we do better as an industry to advance pedagogical efficacy. And one of the things we learned is that the space matters. The physical environment in which we place teachers and students really has a very direct impact on the willingness of those people inhabiting that space to engage. That education largely depends on not just quality of content, that's really important, obviously, and the proficiency of the technology, all that is super important. The expertise of the teachers, of course, really, really important. But if you're missing that lure, if you're missing that thing, that element that attracts students to lean into what they're learning, if that's not there, then you're missing quite a lot. And so what we learned through our that book project was how important creating an experience is, that education is a hands-on experiential thing, and that we need to figure out better ways to deliver that solution.
Well, it seems like if you have two types of rooms, one very traditional and one that's really based on active learning, when students walk up to those rooms, they know instantly within seconds that that room is designed for them. And
Yeah.
there's a different expectation for them. And as we're talking about active learning environments, it's truly reshaping what education is all about, changing the role of the teacher and creating new skill sets, whether it's creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and so on. What do you think has been the biggest changes in the types of furniture that you design, dealing with cognitive, emotional, and or even the physical development of students? What have been the biggest ones?
I think the most noticeable change in the years that we've done this is just how much more diversity there is in the furnishings.
Oh,
Classrooms used to look pretty homogeneous. You'd walk in and virtually everybody had the same desk and chair, size, shape, color. And what we notice now is that in most schools that are actively promoting and pursuing an active learning environment, what they're willing to offer is diversification in terms of assets or resources in that classroom space. And that's interesting because students respond differently. You can watch this, you can literally physically watch kids respond differently to the size of the furniture, the shape of it, the color, the texture. And what's interesting is that students tend to find their way towards the piece of furniture that for them provides the most comfort, if you will, cognitively to lean into the subject matter. You don't have to say, Billy, you go to the round desk and Sarah, you go to the square one. They do it on their own. They find their way towards the piece of furniture that to them makes the most sense from a cognitive comfort perspective. And so I guess my long answer to your question is that now, because we're offering now a broader, more diverse set of assets or resources inside of a classroom, I think that's really changed and helped students engage more fully into content.
Well, it's interesting, years ago, furniture, as you said, was all pretty similar. Quality was always different, but it was very price sensitive.
Right.
And I would think with all the selection that is out there today and the research and development that you've put into the furniture, I know price is important, but so is kids' ability to want to use it and that it is flexible for the teacher. So congratulations to you for spending that time and effort trying to get in to understand what education needs. And it's exciting. So when it comes to, that's furniture, when it comes to architectural design changes, there's been a lot. There's been more natural light, flexibility, adaptability, overhead garage doors, all kinds of different things. What do you think have you seen being the design features that architects put in spaces that have been the greatest contributor to making a successful active learning environment?
It's a great question. I think you mentioned it earlier, one of the key, I think, contributions that architects have made to learning spaces has been the introduction of more light into natural light into spaces, ambient lighting into spaces, I think has had a very big and positive impact on learners. There's two other things I would say too, Dennis. One is getting away from everything being so geometric in terms of the design or shape of things. But the biophilic design principles have really made their way into learning environments where you have fractal sort of design, where not everything is a square or a rectangle. You have lots of natural organic shapes surrounding the learners now. That seems to be really, I think, an important contribution. And then the third thing I would say is acoustical properties or acoustical values. I think architects have done a really good job of understanding that noise or sound can really detract from the learner experience, and it can break concentration. It can really be an impediment to learning. I think architects have done a really good job of introducing materials and design principles into spaces that help make sound less of a distraction for learners and for teachers.
Well, we're at a point in time today where the COVID-19 pandemic is here. And, there's been a lot of stress put on teachers, parents, and certainly students. What lessons do you think will have been learned coming out of this pandemic that might be applied as we move forward in the future? Any guesses there?
Well, I think one guess would be that how emotional, I should say, learning is. It's not a clinical practice. It is a very emotional. We hear a lot about social emotional learning, and I think that what the pandemic has done is drawn a bright line underneath that concept. I know from my own experience, I have 3 children, all of whom have been out of school for the most part for the last 9 months, and we can see the effect. My wife and I can see the impact that that's had on their emotional sides, and it's made, I think, them all appreciate more what going to school really means. Going to school is a place to become smarter and to sharpen our skills and to accumulate information that helps us make our way better in the world. But it's also a place that reinforces who we are as people. It helps us identify and have a self-awareness and our contributions to our communities and to the world writ large. I think that schools get undervalued and under credited for just how important the emotional impact is in developing young people. And I think that's the key maybe takeaway from me from this whole experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, those observations seem to be somewhat in line with Ted Dintersmith, who's going to be the keynote speaker at this year's EDspaces conference. And I know you've met him and you'll be getting together with him. So, the future here for education, for furniture design, for space design is just on the forefront. I think there's a lot of openness on the part of teachers and students to really think outside the box and to change the space, because that changes the way they learn. You just can't learn in a very traditional double-loaded corridor with all the same furniture. You just can't do it, can you?
You can't. And if you think about the average child now that's in public schools or in any school, K through 12, their world is extremely dynamic, right? They're on their iPhones, they're streaming something on TV. I mean, the world that they inhabit is one that's very dynamic. There's lots of change going on constantly. And so to think you can take a student who lives that life outside of school and stick them in a school environment that's very binary, it's very placid. That's not a world that they understand, because everything around outside of school is so exceedingly dynamic. And so I think it just makes sense to try to match the expectations, the tempo, et cetera, of a child's life inside the school as well as outside. Those to me, should not be markedly, radically different than each other. And I think that's what educators have realized, is that school needs to have that dynamic characteristics so that kids will stay familiar with it. They recognize that world.
Well, I know, and you probably do as well, that schools aren't designed for change or for trial and error or to fail. Right. And I know when it comes to use of technology, the kids that I know, they love to fail. I mean, they failed 5 or 6 times before I have enough nerve to try the first change, and whether it's software or hardware. So they get right through it. And it seems like this environment that we're in right now with the COVID might just set a new course for pulling the structure out and allowing ambiguity to be something that is welcomed. Because as you said, kids can work through that.
Sure.
And certainly they can take the furniture that you design and put in place to change the spaces that they work in. Now they're working in small groups, large groups, independent, and they access knowledge off of their laptop or off of their iPad. They don't have to wait until they're communicated and shared by the teacher anymore. They can get it on their own.
You bet. And where you see that a lot is in maker spaces. I know we talked a little bit about that earlier, but maker spaces is where you see the resilience of students, the durability of students, their ingenuity. I mean, that's why we love the maker space so much, is because it is a space that you just described, where risk is actually what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to fail. You're supposed to try and try and try again. That's what we love about maker space, is that it sort of brings out this inspiration in kids to try things without fear of failing so much. We don't want a school economy that's based on fear. You want educational economies to be built on a sense of agency and hope, and taking risks, measured risks, of course, but risk taking. And I think makerspace is that little embryonic opportunity for us to implant some greater sense of risk taking in schools that I think has maybe been lost in a lot of ways.
Well, there's all kinds of those successes going on around the country. But as you know, teachers are in their classroom all day and they're kind of in their own silo. They don't get a chance to get out and see those kinds of successes that you're talking about. But once they do, I found all of them being very welcome to trying something, as long as there's that administrative support to them, because the kids are ready.
Absolutely.
The kids are ready. So they're ready to take that tour and not even have to leave their classroom. They're already on a tour. They're outside their walls, and really having a lot of fun and learning at the same time. Well, are there any final comments? I know we've covered everything, and we tried to do it in a really short amount of time. Anything you might share to the teachers out there in terms of this COVID pandemic? Anything else that we haven't thought of?
Well, in terms of the pandemic, I think all of us that are paying any attention recognize, again, the value that schools bring to our communities. Schools are I think, the linchpin to a great economy. I think you can't have a great economy if you don't have an educated populace. That's pretty evident. I think we've seen the effects of schools being shut down, what that's done to the economy. The other thing that the pandemic has done is it's underscored the value of teachers and the stress that these people are under in normal circumstances, right? You throw a pandemic into the mix, you layer that on top of being an educator. And I think we all should take a moment, if we haven't already, just to reflect on how important teachers are to our children, to our economy, to the safety of our communities, to the treasury, to the wealth of this country. I think teachers are, and my mom, by the way, is a retired school teacher, so I have a soft spot for teachers. I will discuss that I have a real soft spot for teachers. But notwithstanding my mom's experience, I think all of us know teachers who have impacted our lives and have made a huge difference. We can all point to a teacher or two that really gave us some sense of purpose and value in our lives. And this pandemic has only, to me, made my appreciation for teachers, those that I know and that I don't know, greater. And I hope that most people feel the same way.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark, for sharing your expertise. This has been really a great conversation. It's going to be one of the best, I think, conferences coming up for EDspaces. So it's been nice chatting with you. And I would just like to share that I'm Dennis Young. I'm the founder of issueseneducation.net, the leading forum for interviewing thought leaders like Mark on the topics that are really driving change in education today. So thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Dennis. I appreciate it.
Okay.